somebody who claimed that they had a an experience with a mimic.
Yes, I recall that. Thank you.
And
I'd rather not recall it. It's one of those things that just yucks me right out. I don't like it.
Is it up there with Mothman for you?
I don't find Mothman yucky. I find him to be a respectable creature with a strong moral compass and handsome and dat booty dough.
Oh, dat booty dough. There's the name of the episode, Mothman's Booty. All right. I had mentioned when we read that, I should do a deeper dive into mimics. And then we got this email and I decided, I really better dive into the topic of mimics. Kat and Jethro, I just saw me and she tried to tell me something.
What?
Yeah. I had the strangest experience 3 nights ago. Stranger than anything I've ever experienced before. It was around midnight, and I was making myself some tea. My partner, Adele, was out, so the apartment was super quiet. I suddenly noticed something out on the balcony, and at first I thought it might be a neighbor or someone who was lost, but when I looked closer, I nearly dropped the kettle. It was me out there. Same hair, same clothes, everything. She even had the same little bracelet on that I had been wearing for about a week at this point. Now, I know this sounds impossible, but here's the weirdest part. She was gesturing at me, almost like she was trying to give me a warning. At one point, she pressed her hand against the glass of the door and was mouthing something, but I couldn't make out what the words were. I felt like she was desperate to try to tell me something important, maybe even something that hasn't happened yet. I stood there frozen until she suddenly just disappeared. 1 second she was there, and the next she flickered away. I'm not sure if I believe in time loops or omens, but the intensity in her eyes completely freaked me out. Could it have been some future version of me trying to communicate? I've never felt so spooked in my life. And I keep going over it in my head, wondering if I missed a critical message, like a warning about something I might do or someplace I shouldn't go to. Adele says it could have been a weird reflection, or just my imagination running wild. But I'm pretty sure of what I saw. Part of me wants to dismiss the whole thing, but another part can't help thinking, what if it was actually me coming back or from the future or a different dimension or whatever? Don't make the same mistake I did. Maybe she was trying to tell me that. Anyway, I had to share this with you. Let me know your thoughts, even if you think I've officially lost it. I'm trying to keep it together, but my mind keeps going back to those eyes and the urgency in them. Keep flying your freak flag, Mia. All right.
Oof.
I love the idea of it being a time loop. I love the idea of it being a future you coming back to warn you about something. That's right in my wheelhouse.
Kind of like the 2005 version of A Sound of Thunder, which we watched the other day, unfortunately.
Sadly, a horrible film. They took Ray Bradbury's classic and, what they did is they tore the cover off and then they wiped their butts with it. And then they put it in the sink and lit it on fire. It was terrible. Anyway, a mimic is an entity or a phenomena that copies the form, behavior, or appearance of a person or a creature. Now, this is what I'm thinking. It sounds to me like a very specific type of mimic. This mimic is called a fetch. Did you know there were different types of mimics?
I did not know.
Are you happy that you do?
I pretty much avoid anything related to mimics.
No, I don't blame you.
What I was telling you not long ago, it was very late at night. I was watching some TikToks and one came up about a young girl who thought she had encountered a mimic. And I just threw my phone and I was like, good night, bye, I'm done.
Didn't you tell me she was sitting on the floor with her back against the bedroom door and you could hear her mother on the other side of it? Mm-hmm. All sweet and saying, "What's the matter, sweetie? Open the door. Everything's okay." And she knew her mother wasn't there.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then later, her mom was knocking on the door, like, why is your door locked? What's happening? What's,
My God.
and she said, when did you get home? And she was like, I just got home. What's happening? And yeah, no, thank you. No, I don't like it. Even if 0% of it is true, I don't like it.
It's not just an unknown. It is such a bizarre unknown that it makes you think that it could be real.
And you know how I feel about being tricked. I don't like trickery at all.
That's true. Your mom once asked me what you wanted for Christmas, and you knew that she had called me, and I didn't want to tell you what it was, and you thought you were going to be tricked.
I don't like it.
I get that. I don't like surprise parties. Never throw me a surprise party. I will just leave. Anyway, tales of the fetch, they date back to ancient Ireland. Now, it will appear as a double of someone still alive, often signaling a dire warning or a looming tragedy. It's eerie because it looks familiar. It's coupled with its association with death omens. It makes the fetch a particularly terrifying type of mimic. And yes, there have been stories that go back centuries, especially in Irish folklore, but they're still happening today, according to some people. The modern fetch encounters with this ancient omen. If you've ever caught yourself doing a double take because you thought you saw somebody you knew only to find out that they were nowhere near you, we see people here in Ecuador all the time who are Ecuadorians, but look like people we know. We call them, oh, that's Ecuadorian Bill. So it's a common thing. You see people at an airport or something and you go, oh my God, that's kind of like a doppelganger.
Yeah.
But
I made a TikTok about the Ecuadorian Adam Driver that I saw. It was wild.
I'm sure that guy would be thrilled to know that he's now TikTok famous as the Ecuadorian Adam Driver. But usually when you do see that, it's a case of mistaken identity. But what if you're absolutely certain you're seeing this person right down to their clothes, their facial expressions, maybe even their voice, yet they were physically in a completely different location, maybe even a different part of the world? It's a very unsettling scenario, and it falls under the umbrella of the fetch. Now, as I said, even though it goes back to Irish or even Celtic folklore, modern-day sightings are still popping up in odd corners on the internet and apparently in our email inbox. Whether it's on Reddit or a blog or a ghost hunting forum, reports keep surfacing that sound strikingly similar to the classic fetch tales: a silent apparition, a foreboding feeling, and an uncanny sense that a tragedy or crisis is on the way. Again, kind of Mothman-y. I'm sure that his intentions are good, though.
Oh, of course.
So we're going to look at some of the modern day fetch encounters. Again, it's a supernatural double of an image of a person who is still alive. It could be even you, is what I was able to find out. Tradition describes a fetch as showing up to signal an oncoming crisis, often a death or an illness or a severe accident. I don't mean to freak you out, Mia. It's a harbinger of doom, is what most people say. It looks so much like the real person that witnesses are left rattled. In some cases, though, the fetch might be silent or just lurking before it fades away. And it might mimic gestures, it might wave, it might even speak in a voice reminiscent of a living individual. This concept it's very similar to doppelgängers, in Germanic history. Yeah. Many cultures have their own versions of the idea of seeing someone's ghost, but they're still alive. And essentially that's what they're saying this is. But what makes the fetch distinct, at least in Irish tradition, is that it's almost always an omen. But to put your mind at ease, Mia, it doesn't always mean death. It could just mean be careful. You're going into a strange part of your life and you need to make good decisions.
Yeah, a lot of times in folklore, death and transformation are pretty interchangeable.
That's very true.
And so maybe it's something absolutely incredible that's going to be happening. You just don't know. Maybe it's like when Mothman shows up and everything is better.
It could be. I love the positive spin. This is a whole new cat for 2025, I have to say. And I wanted to point that out to Mia, that you're not going to die. Okay. Don't worry about that. I had an experience when I was 11 years old. I was staying at a friend's camp and we went to visit this old man who always had lived in this remote area. And he was kind of known as a fortune teller. You know, he could like tarot cards and stuff, but also just regular playing cards. And he's explaining as he's shuffling, you know, what each card could mean. And then he gets to the part where he says, he's doing my reading. The ace of spades usually means death. And the first card he pulls is the ace of spades. I was terrified. He was quick to say, it could mean, you know, maybe you're just, you know, going to get a cold. It was very sweet. One of the more frequently referenced modern fetch stories comes from a now archived post on a paranormal themed subreddit. A college student who calls herself Sarah was heading back to her dorm room around midnight. And as she reached her floor, she caught a glimpse of her friend Emily dashing around the corner of the hallway. Emily was wearing the same sweatshirt and jeans that she had seen Emily wearing earlier in the day, so Sarah assumed Emily had popped out for a late night snack. When Sarah tried to catch up, she reached the corner and found absolutely no one there. The hallway ended at a locked fire door. So she obviously was confused and she texted Emily to ask her why she was rushing and where she was rushing off to. And Emily responded immediately and said that she had been in bed all day fighting off a bad cold and hadn't left her room since dinner. Sarah was 100% sure that she had seen Emily. And Emily ended up in the campus health center later that week with pneumonia, which quickly turned into a severe case. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that what she saw was Emily's fetch and that she was foreshadowing Emily's illness. It's very weird timing.
Yeah, interesting.
It could just be, of course, a trick of the eyes and a coincidence.
Well, like we've talked about so many times, your brain, the natural process of things is for your brain to make sense of patterns and find patterns in places where they're not necessarily patterns. So if you see someone, your brain goes, oh, who's that? You must and tries to figure out who it is. And okay, a locked fire door kind of adds a different twist to it, but so often it's just our brains are slow.
Well, that's a good point. And we've had I was talking with Lindsay, my friend Lindsay Schnebley and co-host of the Shallow End podcast, about witnessing something so bizarre that you take a step back and you go, this can't really be happening. This isn't your mind's trying to make sense of what is just a totally unexpected event. So that's what our brains do, is try to.
Like when I saw that guy at the mall blow his nose into his hand and then just flick it. My brain could not comprehend what I was seeing. I was like, that's got to be paranormal somehow.
I had to take you to the Jamba Juice and settle you down.
It was upsetting. J as in Jamba.
Yes, we like yes.
Your little shirt and your little pants.
Well, this was making the rounds on social media. It involved a group of friends. They were on a late night video call like Zoom or FaceTime or something. And of course, video calls during COVID and the pandemic lockdown, that's when they really started to become more and more popular. And the story goes that four friends were having a social gathering, having cocktails all in different places. And a fifth friend, Rachel, abruptly reacted with a scream. She claimed she saw a shadowy shape right behind one of the other participants, a guy named Dan. Now, this was on another participant's screen, and the shape looked eerily like Dan. Same hair, same shoulders, but a strangely blank expression. Everyone else tried to see it, but no other person caught a glimpse before it vanished. Moments later, Dan, who was chatting, he was on his screen, but right after he appeared in the background of another person's screen, his lights flickered and he disappeared from the call. And when Dan came back online, he said he felt dizzy and had fainted. He'd knocked a table lamp over in the process, and he had unplugged his laptop. So whether it was just a random fainting episode or something completely different is up for debate. But two of the friends remain adamant that they both saw a second Dan in the background at a different house right before Dan fainted and his screen went out. Now, it could be a glitch. It could be a compressed video artifact, which is not uncommon in streaming. But the timing, plus the fact that he had a minor health scare, supports the idea that perhaps it is something like a fetch situation.
That's so fetch.
Okay. You're up in your bedroom, you're gaming, it's late night. You stretch, you glance out the window, and you freeze because you see a figure in the driveway staring up at you. Then you realize with a jolt, this figure looks just like your mom. It's the middle of the night. Same hairstyle, same sweatshirt that she had on earlier, but she's standing totally still, illuminated by some kind of a faint glow, probably the street lamp. But this is exactly what happened to a teenager in the UK. He was concerned and slightly creeped out, so he rushed downstairs to see if something was wrong. His mother was dozing on the living room couch, nowhere near the driveway, and definitely not outside.
Yeah, that sounds like something my mom would do.
Has your mom done that? Left in the middle of the night and then just stood in the driveway and stared in your bedroom window?
It just seems, it like tracks is all I'm saying.
Okay. What would be her motive for doing that?
To fuck with me?
These experiences don't just happen in private spaces like homes or dorms. Sometimes they can be in a very public space where multiple witnesses see them. A woman named Kendall wrote in about her unsettling experience when she claimed to see her brother at a cafe hours before he was supposed to arrive in town. According to her post, she waved and she expected him to come over, but instead he got up and walked out of the cafe without even looking in her direction. So she was confused, understandably.
Yeah, he owes her money.
She texted him. She said, "Hey, why did you leave so fast?" He replied that he was still on the road and he was 3 hours away. And later, when the real brother showed up, the cafe staff remarked, weren't you here this morning?" They recognized him from the quiet guy who had sipped coffee alone. Now, days after that strange encounter, her brother was rushed to the hospital with an unexpected health crisis. Now, logically, it could have been a bizarre case of near exact look-alike. Kendall certain, though, that she witnessed a fetch. Everything from the clothing to the posture matched him exactly, and the looming health scare felt too much of a coincidence. Healthcare workers see a lot of stuff like this. One nurse claims to have seen a fetch, and this is pretty weird. On a Facebook group for the unexplained, a nurse said that she was working a late night shift at a busy hospital and she spotted one of the elderly patients at the far end of the corridor. Man, just the standing there, at the end of a dimly lit corridor all alone, just an old man in a hospital gown staring at the floor while the fluorescent lights flicker. That's how I pictured it.
No,
I don't know if that was the case or not. Anyway, it baffled her because the patient was bedridden and in poor condition. The nurse thought perhaps the patient had somehow mustered the energy to pull himself out of bed and wander. So she went to assist him, and as she approached, he vanished. She rushed to the patient's room only to find him still in bed, unresponsive. And despite efforts to resuscitate the patient, he passed away within an hour. And many staffers, they dismissed this as a combination of stress and poor lighting and exhaustion. But the nurse was convinced she'd seen his fetch stepping out of his body to make a final silent farewell, I guess.
Oof.
I know. Why do these stories bother us so much?
Because it's trickery.
Even because you're being tricked. Even at a time where many of us, of course, turn to science and reason or Pixar, it didn't happen type skepticism. Part of it might be tied to the emotional gut punch of seeing a loved one in two places at once or in a place they're not supposed to be. And as you mentioned earlier, humans are wired to respond strongly to faces. especially those we recognize intimately. And when that recognition is flipped on its head, when we see someone where they're not supposed to be, it triggers this deep sense of the uncanny. And in the older folklore, the fetch was a more straightforward omen. See it and you're going to die. Modern accounts, they seem to be slightly more broad in context.
It's a more chill fetch.
It is a chill fetch. It's fetch light with 1/3 the fear of regular fetch. Today, the stories indicate that it's more of a warning of pending trouble as opposed to you're going to die.
Right.
But at the core, the fetch stories reflect our fascination with identity and mortality and the boundary between life and whatever lies beyond. Even in today's world, it's really jarring, and it's part of us. It's just how we are wired. The fetch phenomena is described in many ways as a messenger or an omen. It's an experience that some say has a direct connection to the paranormal. Others say it could be some sort of a psychic crisis, telepathic communication. Some parapsychologists have suggested that during moments of extreme stress or near-death experiences, a person might unconsciously project a sort of astral self. This projection could briefly manifest, especially to somebody emotionally close to the person. Of course, there is no scientific support for this.
Sure.
Other people say, yeah, probably coincidence, lookalikes, mistaken identity. And that's the simplest view, is that people spot someone who strongly resembles a friend or a family member. And in the heat of the moment, especially if it's dark or maybe you're tired or you're anxious or you've been in a high stress situation, your brain might try to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
After the fact, an unrelated crisis can make the sighting seem even more sinister, but that would just, of course, be an hallucination. In an age where everything is documented, posted, and sometimes overanalyzed, encounters with a fetch still manage to slip into the realm of the unexplained. And maybe the fetch is a reminder that for all of our advances, humans still crave a little mystery in their life. And we want to know if there might be something more out there that we can't measure or pin down, or perhaps it's just our collective fear of losing those who are close to us. And our brain does this as some sort of a protective measure.
Well, I don't like it.
No matter how you feel about it, the fetch manages to tap into some of our deepest anxieties and curiosities. It's not just a mimic. It's a very specific type of mimic. My information came from the Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, as well as Lady Gregory Visions and Belief in the West of Ireland from 1920. And then, of course, various credible sources like Reddit. So there you have it. That's the fetch for you.
I love it.
You're going to be okay, Mia. I promise.